If you're not microdosing effort, you're betraying your potential. You're betraying your dreams, goals, and ambitions. Let's get straight into it. Who is this video for? It's for those who are struggling to be consistent. It's for those who don't have enough momentum on the journey towards their goals. It's for those who are struggling to find enough time, focus, or energy to invest into their goals or to invest into skills that they want to develop. So why is microdosing effort the solution? Well, first we need to present the problem so that we can properly understand why microdosing effort is the solution. And I'm going to give you practical examples and practical steps for how to implement this. First, the problem. The problem is in the idea of deep work, or in a certain understanding, wrong understanding of the idea of deep work. For those of you who are not familiar, deep work has been popularized by Cal Newport in his book of the same title, Deep Work. It is the idea that you need to have dedicated blocks of time where all interruptions or distractions are removed, and then you use the block of time to enter a state of deep focus, which then facilitates deep work. Deep work is what allows for serious results and improvement when implemented consistently in your schedule. However, here is one problem with this idea, or again with a certain understanding of this idea. Deep work requires that you do the proper environmental design, meaning designing of the space where you will be executing the task, and also not just physical space as in the room, physical space as in the laptop that you're using. Is the phone there? If it is, are the notifications on or off? Is it in airplane mode or not? So environmental design includes everything that you can modify so that you minimize or absolutely remove any chances of distraction and or interruption of your task. So this idea of deep work is demanding. Let's call it like it is. It's extremely beneficial, and I advise everyone to work towards having deep work blocks or blocks of time dedicated for deep work, to work towards having them consistently in their schedule. Of course, I have them, so I'm a big advocate of deep work. However, the problem is when we start thinking that deep work is the only work that counts, when we start thinking that the only way for our effort to be worth it is if it's part of deep work, which means it's at least a 60 or 90-minute block of time, again, that is very demanding in its setup, meaning you have to remove or drastically reduce chances of interruption by someone or something else. So if it's so demanding, and not everyone can implement it, but then we have this idea that effort counts only as part of deep work, then obviously we see a major overlap between people who cannot often enough have deep work blocks of time and think that anything less is not worth it, which results in doing nothing. So what is the solution? Microdosing effort. What is microdosing effort? It's not just a mindset shift. Oh, you can do little and it's going to count. You can do little and it's going to be worth it. No. That's passive approach. That's a lazy approach. I have to say it lazy approach because it's the approach of recognizing the situation, stating what could possibly be a solution, and that's it. I'm going to hope to somehow, sometimes implement that solution. No, microdosing effort is intentionally using every chance you have, and sometimes even scheduling those small chances or setting up alarms for those small chances to engage in small bursts of effort in order to accumulate volume, to accumulate repetitions. Let's use an example. reading. Reading is the best example of how people expect too much of themselves when it comes to being able to always have deep work. And if you're reading just for enjoyment, maybe you don't want to consider it deep work, but you're still following the same idea. You still want reading to be a ritual, just like deep work is a ritual. Why are we using the word ritual? Because once again, it's strictly dedicated block of time. Anything and everything else is removed, any interruption or distraction, and this is a block of time that is dedicated specifically and strictly to this, and with that to ourselves. No one else can enter that space or that block of time. So that's why it's a ritual. And a lot of people who say that they struggle to read as much as they would, they think that the only reading that counts, or the only reading that they are willing to engage in, is that reading as in form of ritual. We are imagining, for example, a cozy corner in your room or in your home. The lighting is just right. Maybe there is some really low volume background music. No one is interrupting you. Maybe you have a cup of tea or coffee or hot chocolate next to you, and that's that idealized version of reading as a ritual, which makes it, infinitely easier to focus on the material, whether it's reading for pure enjoyment or semi-research for your work, semi-enjoyment, depending on if you've managed to blend your passion and career, profession, or maybe side project. But that doesn't matter. We have reading as a ritual, which aligns with the idea of deep work, again, regardless of whether reading is part of your work or not. How about microdosing effort? What would that be in this case? It would be having a book on your phone. It would be having a Kindle if you can afford it, and always having a physical book somewhere nearby, or pretty often having it nearby. If you don't always have it nearby, you always have your phone on yourself. And what is microdosing effort? When you have prepared yourself, not just thought, okay, I'm going to read whenever I can, even if it's one page. No. You prepare yourself by having a book or books on your phone, on your Kindle, and physical books nearby, and then any chance you have literally more than 2 minutes of free time, you either pull out your phone or Kindle or grab a physical book and you read a page, maybe read a half a page. Is this way different than reading as ritual? Yes. Does it lack some of the benefits of reading as ritual? Absolutely. But what is better? Having 10, 15 moments in the day where you read half a page or one page, or having 0 moments in the day where you read anything, not counting scrolling and news, where you don't read anything, and you're waiting for that day when you can engage in reading as a ritual in your favorite corner. What is better? Waiting to have more time, more focus, more energy, better setup for reading, and waiting and waiting and waiting? Or is it better to have a strong and clear intention to microdose reading throughout the day? The same can be done with language learning, with almost any skill acquisition that can be done over the phone, or with an instrument or piece of equipment that can be carried around. We cannot do this with piano learning, or playing the violin, or playing the cello. We cannot microdose effort. Or, let me correct myself, you can microdose effort if reading music, reading sheets of music is part of your learning journey. I cannot say, because I've never tried learning to play the piano or violin or cello, although I would love to at some point. However, what I'm saying is we can also expand what are the actions that could count as effort that contributes to the skill acquisition. So once again, I don't know if reading sheets of music would help you with practicing the piano or violin or cello or guitar. But if it would, well, there you have it. You have the solution on how to microdose effort, even with these more complex goals and more complex skills. But once again, reading, writing, write one sentence 10 times per day. Language learning. When I say reading, let's just keep in mind, we're talking about studying or researching, not just reading for pleasure. So I have always, and this has been the case for the last, 6 years, that I always have a couple of books on my phone and physical books nearby. I'm saying this without a Kindle because I've acquired or bought Kindle only 2 or 3 years ago, and I haven't been using it as much as I could have or should have, but I've been reading on my phone religiously for the last 5 or 6 years, maybe even more. Replace scrolling with reading on your phone. And don't say, oh, it's not as enjoyable as reading a physical book. Of course it's not as enjoyable. Don't say, oh, the screen is too small. Of course the screen is too small. We want to be reading from the physical book or from a larger screen. Of course. But we are working towards something. You're not condemned to always be doing this in a form that you don't like doing it. But let's talk a bit more about the structure of microdosing effort. How structured should it be? This is an opportunity for self-honesty. How structured do you need it to be? I already clarified it for you a bit when I said this is not just a mindset shift and then you are hoping to microdose effort. You're hoping to remember to microdose effort. It is a mindset shift, of course, because we are learning to acknowledge that accumulation of small bursts of effort, even if it's 1 or 2 minutes, but it's done with high frequency, 8, 10, 15, 20 times per day, it matters. So it is a mindset shift. But then we have to implement some structure. We have to find a way to make sure that we engage in this behavior. So how are you going to do it? Are you going to identify 8 to 10 moments of the day? I wanted to say portions of the day, but 1 or 2 minutes is not a portion of the day. It's literally a moment. So are you going to identify 8 to 10 moments of the day to have them predetermined for engaging in microdosing effort? Or are you going to set alarms? So you can have it written down as a schedule. You can set alarms, and when the alarm goes off, you do it. Are you going to have more of a rough schedule? For example, saying, okay, when I'm done brushing my teeth, I'm going to do it. And before I head for my workout, I'm going to do it. And when I'm finished with my workout, on the way back home, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it right before I sit down to eat. I'm going to do it right before dinner and right after dinner. And I'm going to do it before I start brushing my teeth. And I'm going to do it one last time before I go to bed. That is 8. And I freestyled this. I didn't even prepare what moments of the day I'm going to mention. This was freestyling. Maybe you come up with completely different moments of the day. The point is, it is impossible not to find 8, 10, or even more moments of the day that don't last longer than 2 minutes. If you want to extend them, you extend them, and depending on the activity and depending on the time that you have available. But the point is to keep the concept of microdosing effort, because if you start expanding these into 5-minute blocks of time, then you're going to start failing, because initially you're going to get excited and say, okay, I'm going to do 10 times per day, each microdose being 5 minutes. You're going to get an initial hype, how much work you're getting done, or how much effort you're putting in, all the repetitions and volume that are being accumulated, but then soon enough you're going to fail because you're going to be too much. So let's keep it a real microdose. I will just make a side note that this relates to the concept of greasing the groove, but I would prefer to make a separate video for greasing the groove. We could also say this is almost identical, but greasing the groove as a structure and as a specific method that was developed in Soviet weightlifting, I think deserves more background, more explanation in terms of the background and how it was developed in physical training and how to translate it into other skills, other activities and habits. Again, almost identical, but I would say microdosing effort is a bit more flexible term. So you have to ask yourself and to be honest with yourself, to inquire, how much structure do I need? But we know one thing for sure, you cannot get by with zero structure. There is no way that you say, okay, David, this is interesting, but I'm just going to freestyle it and I'm going to go through the day hoping that it comes, that it crosses my mind to microdose effort in whatever the activity is. So now the question, what is the activity? To do a bit of that brainstorming. Again, let's help ourselves. Let's see, because if you have 4 or 5 different things that you would like to do, first of all, don't do 4 or 5 things. Don't try to implement 4 or 5 things into this concept or to try them out with this concept, or vice versa, try out this concept with them, all at the same time, 4 or 5 different activities. Let's start with one, but then let's see which one is the most appropriate. Because, for example, if I'm researching a certain topic or have a list of things that I want and need to read, and I'm writing, and I'm learning a new language, and I'm practicing handstand, well, let's right away say that practicing handstand, although possible, if I'm spending most of my time at home, very possible to microdose effort with practicing handstand, but let's remove it right away because I'm spending a lot of time outside. Then I'm left with writing, reading, and language learning. Which one is the easiest one to start with so that I can actually gain some confidence in implementing this microdosing effort as a method? Well, maybe it's reading. Again, maybe. For the sake of example, maybe it's reading. Why? Because I can have a book on my phone at all times, and already as a modern human being, there is this habit of checking our phone at all times, and I can start practicing the habit of when I take my phone out of my pocket, instead of checking notifications on Instagram, I actually open a book and read one page. Again, this is an example. Maybe for some of you, you're going to say writing is going to be easier for practicing microdosing effort. Maybe for some of you, it's going to be language learning. By the way, at this point, right now I'm using it for language learning, and I've been using it for years for reading and studying. But here is an interesting thing. To go back to deep work, of course, we want to be implementing deep work into our schedule, hopefully on a consistent basis. But here is the thing. I literally make money off of reading and researching and writing. That's how I make my living. So I get to organize my day for as much deep work as possible. And still, I microdose my reading. Still, to this day, I microdose my reading. So I get to organize, I'm privileged and blessed to be able to organize my day however I want. and still I find it extremely useful to microdose reading. So then the question for you, who are probably not in the same position as me, and I'm not saying this to brag, I'm saying this to show understanding and compassion for your situation. You're probably not in a situation where you can actually take 2-hour block in the day and say, this is it, I'm reading and no one can interrupt me because this is my work. I get to do it. Again, I earned that position, I worked, and actually microdosing reading was my way of working towards that position. So if you're not in that position, if you cannot do that, if you cannot say, okay, I'm going to take 3 hours where no one can interrupt me and I'm going to just read or just write. If you cannot do that, you are betraying yourself by not microdosing effort. The camera shut down, which was probably my sign to keep things shorter. So I'm going to wrap this up, friends, by just asking you, what is the one activity, not 2 or 3 or 5, what is the one activity that you're going to use to start practicing this method of microdosing effort, and how much structure do you need? Be honest with yourself and share in the comments so that maybe we can brainstorm and I can help you to actually implement this method with greater success. Thank you.